Really tried to have something witty to say, something smart and clever, some jump out, hit you, get your interest, suck you in so you won't leave the live stream and you'll stick around for a while. I really tried to have something all lined up. I really tried to have something really, really sharp to start us off with. But the most I could do was a couple cans of beer and a bottle of whiskey. So that's going to be what we'll have to deal with tonight. They're not open yet, but they will be soon. I actually thought about that too. Maybe I'll just start off the show with just, put one down, slam it on the table, and start ranting and raving. There'll be plenty of time for drinking, ranting, and raving. Believe me, there'll be lots of that on this show tonight in the aftermath of Pitt losing at Yankee Stadium 28-13. The dogs are whining in the background. The TV's still on with the Florida State-Miami game. It's, things just aren't necessarily going great right now. All right, you know the deal. We're going to let everybody sort of filter in. It's 7 o'clock. We just started. You know what we do here. It's the live show, the live Panther-Lair Post-Game, where we are going to talk about Pitt's loss to Syracuse. A big part of this show is going to be the comments and questions. I mean, I've got some things I'm going to say. I've got some things I'm going to throw out there and thoughts and whatever on the game. I've got my legal pad. Jerry really liked it when I threw my legal pad across the room. I'm not going to throw my legal pad across the room today. I'm going to keep it right here next to me. I've got the stats all up in front of me. We'll talk about those things. But a big part of this show is going to be your comments and questions. I mean, I have my things that I have to say, but you probably can already guess what I'm going to say. I don't think I surprise you people anymore. But I want to hear from you. So, I mean, get in the comment section, get in the chat screen there along the right-hand side of the screen. Put your comments, put your questions, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to ask. We'll read as many as we can. Make sure, of course, if you want to make sure your comment gets read or your question gets answered, you go in as a super chatter. You click the little dollar sign down at the bottom of the screen there, and we will get as many of those. We will definitely get to those. We'll get all the super chatters for sure, and then we'll get as many of the other comments and questions as we can. We always start off with me saying something, you know what I mean? An opening monologue of sorts. And I don't intend to spend a long time on this. But here's what I'll say. There's no analysis of this game. There's none. So, I mean, I really could throw my legal pad across the room. And I would do it just because Jerry liked it. But I'll keep it close just in case I decide I want to reference something. I can't see really what I will want to reference. I can't really see what analysis of this game matters. I can't see what looking at this game on any kind of micro level, what the significance of that would be, what the relevance of that would be. Because all I can see right now is the big picture of a program that has completely folded over on itself. A program that has shown fundamental flaws up and down the room, from coaching staff down through players. A program that is 2-8. You don't bad luck your way into 2-8. You might bad luck your way into a 5-7 season. You might, it's just an injury, a turnover here or there. And we went 5 or 7. Oh, God forbid, 4-8. For some of the better programs, bad luck your way into 6-6. You don't bad luck your way into 2-10 if that's where this thing ends up being. You don't. That's not just 1 or 2 injuries. That's not just 1 or 2 turnovers or 1 or 2, a missed field goal or a kid makes a crazy 60-yard field goal to beat you. That's none of those things. That's not how you end up 2-8. And potentially 2-10. You end up 2-8 and potentially 2-10 with fundamental flaws in your program. And I say this after trumpeting and believing and still believing that there has been a very solid foundation built in this program. That this program has been built to a certain level over the past 9 years, 8 years leading into this year. And it's been built to a certain level, and it's achieved at that certain level, and it's had a lot of stability at that level. And so it's to take nothing away from that. But right now, in this moment, the fall of 2023, it is broken in a lot of ways. It's broken in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of those are fixable. I believe a lot of those ways are fixable. A lot of those breaks. But it's incumbent upon Panther-Lair on this flying home from New York City tonight, if not the bus ride back from Florida State last weekend, or the flight home from Notre Dame the weekend before that, or the flight home from Wake Forest the weekend before that, or the flight home for Virginia Tech a few weeks before that, or the drive back from Acrisure Stadium a week before that, or the bus ride back from Morgantown, West Virginia a week before that, or the ride back from the stadium a week before that. He needs to be thinking about where those breaks are and what those issues are and finding ways to fix them. Because now, like you can have a 6-6 season, where you get to a bowl and you go 7-6 and it's a crappy bowl and everybody says, boy, you had a real bummer of a season. You took a big step back. You can get through that. You can survive. You can survive a 5-7 season where you come out of it and say, well, we had these issues and we're taking these steps to correct it and we're going to make a big step forward. You can make it through all of those things. But when you start operating at the level this program is at right now, when you start looking dead square in the eye of a 2-win season, you survive it. He's going to survive it. He's not going to get fired. He's not going to get fired over this. But you have put yourself squarely in the crosshairs if you don't fix things and fix them promptly. Give me 1 second. Sorry. As I'm trying to formulate my thoughts about Pitt football, there was a dog in his crate whining and whimpering, and it was distracting me and making me start to get slightly upset. This was the most embarrassing loss of the Narduzzi era. I'll say it right out. And look, there's competition. There's competition. I came around on the Georgia Tech game last year. I came around on that game being the worst loss of the Panther-Lair era. I didn't think so at first. I said, no, guys, come on. They lost to Western Michigan at home. That's the worst loss. Losing to a conference opponent, that's not worse. Oh, no, it was worse. Losing to a conference opponent who fired their head coach like 4 days earlier, that was worse than losing to Western Michigan. This is the worst. This is the worst, partially because Syracuse stinks. They lost 5 in a row. They hadn't beaten haven't won an ACC game before this. They stink. Okay? It's partially that. But it's also the fact that your team walked on the field and got pushed around for 4 quarters straight. Got straight up bullied, manhandled, embarrassed. And I believe those players should be embarrassed. And I believe those players probably are embarrassed. They should be for the way that game went and the way they performed. The fact that they could not score more than 1 touchdown. The fact that they could not stop Syracuse's goofy, gimmicky, who cares, we suck, so we're just going to let it all hang out offense. Imagine that idea. Imagine approaching a game where like, you know what? We kind of suck. We got some real issues, so let's just see what happens. Let's just do some goofy stuff. I tweeted it out. It was like Costanza channeling Batman. You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. And Syracuse got nuts. And guess what? It worked. Because Pitt couldn't adjust, couldn't defend, and got ran over by Dan freaking Villari. Dan Villari. This is your king? Dan Villari? This is the guy who marches over you? That was a terrible reference. Strike that from the record that I even said that it wasn't used appropriately. That was worse than when people dropped the Get Your Shine box. It's completely inappropriate. Dan Villari, 17 carries for 154 yards. 9.1 yards per carry for Dan Villari. Dan Villari just want to bring up his measurables for you. Stands 6'4" and 235 pounds, and he averaged 9 yards per carry on 17 attempts. Over and over and over again, Pitt could not stop Dan Villari. And I mean to take, I mean no disrespect to Dan Villari, and I mean to take nothing away from Dan Villari. But if you have any amount of self-respect, if you have any amount of respect for yourself as a football player, as a defense, as a team, how do you let that happen? This team's biggest flaw is offense. It has been since the beginning of the season. The defense has shown encouraging signs, but today they were embarrassed. Top to bottom. Maybe special teams? Special teams was okay. I don't care about special teams. Offense and defense, embarrassed. Top to bottom, front to back, left to right, embarrassed in a way that I really can't think of another Pitt team being embarrassed. I can't think of another single game where they were embarrassed like this. And you could point to the 51-6 game. 51-6 game is one of those, and I hate being that guy, but when you look at the 51-6 game, if it's possible for a 45-point blowout to not be as bad as the score actually indicates, I mean, that one wasn't actually that bad. They were very competitive in the first half, had like 3 really bad field position situations that let the game get out of hand. And it ends up 51-6. The UCF game in 2018, I often reference that as a low point. I mean, they got destroyed in that game, run off the field and embarrassed and should have been embarrassed. They looked like they didn't belong. The ACC championship game in 2018, when Kenny had 8 passing yards. I mean, there are plenty of games where they've been clearly the inferior team, and they've gotten beat like it. Even 58-7 earlier this year. They've had the Notre Dame game in 2020, the Clemson game in 2020. They've had those games. But I can't think of another game where a team like this Syracuse team, what are they, 4-5 coming into today, with a 5-game losing streak against any team with a pulse, 0-5 in the conference, and it's not just that they won. It's not just that Syracuse won this game. It's not just that Pitt lost this game. It's that Syracuse pushed them around, that Syracuse controlled this game, that Syracuse dominated this game. And even when it seemed like Pitt had a chance, it was fleeting. And then you get to the fourth quarter, and Pitt has 2 minutes and 10 seconds of possession? 2 minutes of possession in a game where you're fighting to battle back in, and you only hold the ball for 2 minutes? It was one of the most embarrassing performances I've seen. Performances that I think the team probably does feel embarrassed for, and they probably should. It's a new low, this game. And we've seen some lows this year. We've seen some lows. Somebody joked on Twitter, like, this is the worst loss I've seen. And I know we say that every week. And it's true. We talk about different types of lows every week. But this game here, this is a new low. I'm going to try and I have this mute button, I think, that when I cough. Let me see if it works here. Hopefully you didn't hear that. Now, I have no way of knowing if you heard it or not, but hopefully you didn't. But it's a new low. It's a new low for Pitt football in 2023. It's a new low for Pitt football under Pat Narduzzi, and it's a new low for Pitt football in the last, I'm gonna guess, 9 years, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about, the Narduzzi era. And you just come out of this game. I imagine that you came out of this game probably not having any new revelations about the team, any new thoughts about the team or the program. Just everything you were already thinking, it's been enhanced. It's been turned up. It's turned up to 11. If you wanted them to fire the offensive coordinator, you probably want them to fire him even more. If you wanted them to fire Pat Narduzzi, you probably want them to fire him even more. If you wanted them to do this or you wanted them to do that, you probably want them to do it even more. The only bright spot in this game, let me find it. Was in the second quarter, right? The second quarter, when Christian Vera went 7 of 12 for 126 yards, and the receivers made plays. Bub Means had the big play. Konate Mumfield caught the touchdown. That was it. Unless you want to say the Malcolm Epps 36-yard pass from Nate Yarnell, who finally, I forgot the mute button, who finally got in. I mean, when you can actually isolate the bright spots down to like 1 or 2 plays against that team, and no disrespect to Syracuse, they won today, but there's a reason they had the record they had. But I guess there's a reason Pitt has the record Pitt has, right? Okay, I think it's time to start the shots and the comments. What do we think about that? You know what? I'm going to do our first shot. Is this going to be a multiple shot show? Yeah, probably. I joked on Twitter that maybe it would be a 3-shot show, and that was before like the final fumble. Maybe even before, I don't know. It might have been only after a couple of turnovers. But we do want to shout out. First comment in the chat is our friend Voodoo IPA. Good friend of the podcast, been a long time reader and listener. Voodoo IPA says, my daughter is defined in remission as of yesterday. At least I have hope for her. And Voodoo IPA, to you. We're sitting here, we're talking about sports, we're drinking about sports, we're griping and all that stuff. But that's the important stuff. And kudos to you, kudos to your family, and to your daughter. Many more ahead, right? The Pennsylvania bourbon's hitting a little hard today. Woo! All right, let's get the super chatters. What do we got? I know they're in here. All right, Michael B starts us off. Michael B, you're always the first one in, so we appreciate you as a super chatter. Says, Chris, I am bummed beyond belief. Remember a few weeks ago when I asked you about dues if Pitt finished 2-10, you told me Pitt was not going to finish 2-10. What do you think now? I think next season will be more of the same. Yeah, anytime, like anytime it's been suggested that the team would go, off season, or even at various points this season, been suggested that the team would go 2-10 or 3-9 or even 4-8. I've said no, they're not going to do that. They might take a step back from last year. They might only win 8 games. Might have some tough losses, this or that, but they're not going to go 2-10. They're never going to go 2-10 under Narduzzi. I can't rule that out now. I mean, this is hey, you're late to the parade here, buddy. But I mean, I can't rule that out. Not with the way they've played here. This team is talented enough to not lose to Syracuse like this. But the thing is, and I keep sort of having this thought. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, Syracuse, they're good enough to beat Syracuse. But you know what? Like, they were good enough to beat Wake Forest. And they were good enough to beat Virginia Tech. And they were good enough to beat West Virginia. And they were good enough to beat Cincinnati. And they, whatted the bed in every single one of those games. Every single one. And so what reason do I have to believe that on Thursday night they're going to go out there against Boston College and somehow figure it out and get a win? Or they're going to finish it against Duke and somehow figure it out and get a win? I mean, it's possible because I think they're talented enough to do it. But this team this year cannot get out of its own way. Cannot stop making enough mistakes. Cannot execute cleanly enough. Can't tackle. They can't do any of these things well enough or consistently enough that you can rely on them to be successful. Even against the lower teams that they're facing. Cincinnati's not good. Cincinnati, I think they play tonight. But they haven't won a game since they beat Pitt. West Virginia's fine, but they're nothing special. Virginia Tech, they actually just beat up on Boston College, I saw today. So they're okay, but nothing special. Wake Forest isn't any good. Go read the quotes from Dave Clawson. He's saying a lot of things that are similar to either what Pat Narduzzi is saying or what Pat Narduzzi should be saying about Pitt right now. Dave Clawson saying a lot of those things about Wake Forest because they stink too. And then this Syracuse team shouldn't lose this game. Shouldn't lose any of these games. So it's at this point, I mean, obviously you can't count on anything. You can't assume anything with this team. I mean, they've shown they are capable of losing in any situation. I tell you what, This kind of cracks me up almost. You might think this is funny. We'll get back to the super chatter in a second. You know who I really feel bad for? I mean, like who it really stings for. Who this loss might sting more for this group of people I'm about to talk about. It might sting more for them than it does for you. You know who this loss really stings for? Louisville. Imagine being Louisville right now. You're 9-1. You were number 11 in the college football playoff rankings coming into this weekend. You're going to move up to 10 at least, depending on some of these other games. Penn State was 10. They already lost. So you're going to move up at least to 10 at 10-1, or at 9-1, excuse me. So you're going to be a top 10 team, and that's great. But you would be legitimately number 6 in the college football playoff rankings, with the ACC championship game sitting as a play-in game for the playoffs. That if you get there, or when you get there, and if you beat Florida State, you're in the playoffs. Like, that would be the position Louisville would be in right now. That they would have a clear path, win, and you're in. I think. I'm fair, like, you know, I would give it like a 80% chance that if they won out, you know, I don't even know what their last 2 games are, but that they won these last 2 games and then beat Florida State in the ACC title game, they would be in. Except they lost to Pitt. Imagine being Louisville right now. They played like Thursday night, I think, right? They beat Virginia by a touchdown on Thursday night. Imagine being Louisville and you're sitting there watching Pitt blow it against Wake Forest, blow it against Syracuse, and you're like, we lost to this team? This is the team that's keeping us out of the playoffs? We would be a playoff team if we just took care of business against this team? Sucks to be them. All right, let's get some super chatters in here. Michael B, we got you already. Amber says, Amber's contributing money for the new bottle of whiskey fund. So we actually got this bottle at the beginning of the season. If you recall, we finished the last bottle during the Sun Bowl, or at the end of the Sun Bowl. So this is where we've gotten. I don't drink whiskey like on the reg. I pretty much only drink whiskey during these things. So I mean, we're not even halfway through this bottle, Amber. But I appreciate you helping out. We'll put that. We'll set that aside, and we'll be sure to use it toward the next one. Patrick McKinney says, I'm pissed. 4 shots. Signetti has to be gone. Love you. Thank you, Patrick. We appreciate you, buddy. I joked on Twitter. I was like, this might be our first 3-shot show. We've done 2-shot shows a lot. But we haven't done any 3-shot. I said this one might be the first 3-shot. And some people were joking that, you know, after the last turnover, it might have to be a 4-shot show. I don't think we're going to do that because then, you know, we might end up saying things that we regret. can't believe I was muted that whole time. I hit that wrong button. I was trying to be clever and cough. Oh. Okay. All right, guys. I figured it out. I muted it while I coughed, and then I didn't hit the button to unmute. All right. So here's what I was saying, okay? We're talking about the offense. I got you guys. It's this kind of night. It's this kind of night. Oh, goodness. So here's what I was saying. We're talking about the offense, okay? We're talking about Frank Cignetti. We're talking about the offense at Pitt. And yeah, Josh Grubb says, looked like we missed a good rant. You did, so I'm going to start it over. That's what I get for trying to mute while I'm coughing. I'm not going to do that again. If I have to cough, you guys could just hear it. We're all hanging out. So the last comment, I think it was Patrick, said about fire Frank Cignetti. All right. And here's what I say about offensive coordinators. This is what I said back in 2018 when people would ask me, oh, do you think Sean Watson should be fired? It's what I say right now when people say, do you think Frank Cignetti should be fired? And I say, when you look at the production of the offense, this is what I said in 2018, and I'll say it again right now. When you look at the production of the offense, this is the level of performance that typically gets a guy fired. And what I was saying while I was muted, what I was going through and sort of calculating out live on the air, is that in 7 out of Pitt's 10 games this season, 7 out of 10, they scored 2 or fewer offensive touchdowns. 7 out of 10. The only times they scored more than 2 offensive touchdowns were the Wofford game. They had 6. The Cincinnati game, they had 3. And the Louisville game, they had 4. Now, it's not a coincidence. It is not a coincidence that Pitt's only wins came in games where they scored more than 2 offensive touchdowns. You can't win football games scoring 2 offensive touchdowns. And in some of those games, they scored 1. The last 3 games, they've scored 1 touchdown each. Over the last 4 games, they've scored 5 offensive touchdowns. They've had one game, the West Virginia game, they didn't score any touchdowns at all, any offensive touchdowns. And they've gotten 1 in each of the last 3. 1 against Notre Dame, 1 against Florida State, and 1 today against Syracuse. I want to know what Pat Narduzzi thinks when he looks at that, when he sees that. And if you're like, well, Chris, you have a chance to ask him, why don't you ask him on Monday? Okay, I'll ask him on Monday, and I'll tell you what to say. He'll be like, well, it's just been really tough. We're breaking in new quarterbacks, and we've got, 8 different starting offensive line combinations in 10 games, which is true. They started their 8th different combination on the offensive line today, and then moved to a different combination after that one was kind of struggling. It looked like they got back to having Blake Zabovic and Jake Cradle both out there at guard after starting with Jason Collier. I think Collier started. I'll have to check the notes on that. But Narduzzi will talk about all the different offensive line combinations and the struggles with Phil Dracovic in the first 5 games, and then Christian Bayer for the next few games, how that struggled, and the running games never really got off the ground, and they never been able to do this, and they haven't been able to do that, and that's how he'll explain it away. But ultimately, it comes down on somebody. Ultimately, it reflects on somebody. Ultimately, if the offense only scores, 5 touchdowns over the course of 4 games, which is the case right now, the last 4 games, all losses, then it feels like that someone has to answer for that, right? It feels like that has to fall on someone. And that's the kind of performance that would lead to someone losing their job. Now, here's the question. Do you do it now? If you're going to do it, do you make the change now? And I wrote about this in the 321 column yesterday. I sort of advocated for it. That, if you're going to make a change, do it now, so that you can, get started working on the transfer portal, and you can, be aggressive in your efforts there and get working on your next hire. Pat Narduzzi's never done that. I don't really know that he will. I basically asked him about it on Thursday, and he basically shut it down, shut the idea down. But it feels like if you're going to do it, you might as well do it. All right, let's get back into Super Chatters. I apologize to everyone for our extended little delay of being muted there, but I'm back, so it's all good. Everything's set, and you guys can hear me again, much to your dismay. Seem to have lost a bunch of the chats. Michael Headley says, thanks for all your hard work. Us Pitt fans appreciate it. What is something you need to see this offseason so 2024 isn't a repeat of this year? I mean, look, I've always said I don't like advocating for people to lose their jobs. I don't like advocating for someone to get fired. I'm not really comfortable doing that. But I mean, the reality is where they sit right now and how the offense is performed, I don't think you can bring back this offensive staff intact. I think the defensive staff is fine. I think the defensive staff is good. But when you look at how the offense is performed, I mean, I think you have to make changes on that side of the ball. You have to believe you can be better. And that's probably what it ultimately comes down to. And we often talk about expectations and what could Pitt do, what could Pitt realistically do, and could they do this or what could they do that? Like, I think if you're Pat Narduzzi, you have to believe you could do better than what Pitt has done so far. You have to believe you can do better than 7 out of 10 games with 2 or fewer offensive touchdowns. You have to believe you can do better than 5 offensive touchdowns in the last 4 games. You have to believe you can do better than 2-8. You have to believe you can do better than 2-10 or 3-9 or, by God, the best case scenario, 4-8. You have to believe you can do better than that. And if you believe you can do better than that, you have to find a way to make it happen. And I don't think you can run it back with all the same everybody and just assume it's going to get better and believe it'll get better. I think you have to believe it can get better, and then you have to set about doing what you can do to make it get better. Try and find these other super chatters. I feel like I lost a bunch in there. Here, I might be able to see them in here. Bill Florigen says, I'm upset about this. I'm more upset about this loss than the Notre Dame loss. This was bad, maybe angry all around. Cignetti needs to go. Some young guys need to step up. I thought there was an effort to get the ball in Kenny Johnson's hands, which is valuable. I think that's important. I think you do need to get him involved and make him part of the offense. I think the receivers as a whole have been one of the only bright spots on the offense, maybe this season. But Kenny Johnson could certainly do more for this group and play more and get more touches, sweeps, and passes and all those different things. I mean, he could definitely produce more for you. I think he's got more to give. So I'd like to see them get him more involved. I think Rodney Hammond's good. I'd like to see some of the younger running backs, but I think I'd like to see Rodney Hammond a lot. Otherwise, young players, I mean, I think they're pretty much digging into the depth however they can on the offensive line. Tight ends, don't even get me started. If we get started on the tight ends, I might have to do another shot right now, and maybe I will, and then I'll rant about the tight ends. Defensively, yeah, I think there's probably some youth you could get out on the field. John Waffle says, we need to negotiate a buyout. Like was hanging with donors all day. Like I said, we need a new culture. Changes need to be made. I don't see that happening. I think there are changes that need to be made. I don't think Heather Lyke is going to overreact to this season, and I don't really think Pitt is in a position to pay a big buyout. Nor should they be. I mean, this is a conversation we had, 2 springs ago when we talked about Jeff Capel. And we talked a lot about Jeff Capel and a buyout and whether or not they should buy him out. Should they pay that money? How much is it going to be? Should they put up $25 million or $15 million or whatever it was going to be just to try to buy him out? And does, couldn't there be a better use of couldn't there be a better use of that money? Couldn't there be this and that? And I mean, my contentions would all be the same. I don't think Pitt's in a position to pay any kind of giant buyout or sizable buyout to make a coach go away, and so that's not going to happen. So it's probably important to set that point right away. That if you're sitting here talking about what Pitt needs to do to get rid of Pat Narduzzi or to make a change or what head coach they would hire, save your breath. All right, I mean, save your breath. Like, you need to think more about what can Narduzzi do to fix the program or get the program back on track more than you need to think about who could they hire to bring in to replace Narduzzi. Because, like it or not, this next year, next couple years, it's going to be under the direction of Pat Narduzzi. He's going to decide where this program goes. And it's going to be his efforts that are, either going to draw the program back up or keep the program sliding down, on the trajectory they're on this year. But I think it's going to be under his direction one way or the other. Scrolling through, I want to find some more of these super chatters. There, I'm scrolling through the chat and I see you all telling me I'm muted. I know, I messed it up. RJ Seaman 38 says Frank Flintstone blows, but Narduzzi keeps hiring these whatever's fire the snooze. It's just not going to happen. Jack is a super chatter. He says Narduzzi runs Mark Whipple out of town, denies Brennan Marion a shot, brings in Frank Cignetti despite the fact that Slovis came for Whipple. Cignetti brings in Phil. Phil sucks. Does Dews get fired next year if he keeps Cignetti and we go worse than 500? That's interesting. My guess is there'll be a new offensive coordinator next year. That's my guess. That's not based on inside information. That's not based on anything other than just looking at it and saying, well, the offense has been terrible this year. And there's a lot of reasons why that offense has been terrible. Some of it, there's just a lot of reasons. But ultimately, it falls at the feet of the offensive coordinator. And we know how this works. We know how college sports works. We know how NFL works. We know how all of these things work. That when one unit is bad, coordinator gets changed. And so I don't expect him to be back. Now, that still doesn't let Pat Narduzzi off the hook because he's going to have to find the right guy and make the right hire and all of those things. But I don't see him retaining Frank Cignetti. John Waffle says they weren't hesitant to fire Gottfried back in the day. Look, that's before my time. I'll be honest. I came to Pitt in 1997. So I don't know the backstory there. But what I do know is sort of the culture of Pitt right now. And the environment around Pitt, the atmosphere around Pitt. With this athletic director of athletics, and the new chancellor. And I don't know the new chancellor well. I have a great feel for her approach to things. I think she does support athletics. I think she is big behind athletics. I think Patrick Gallagher was very much behind athletics and was a great supporter of athletics. And, I think signed off on a lot of expenditures and signed off on a lot of money going to athletics for a lot of different things, whether it was facilities or coach hirings and those kinds of things. What we haven't seen them be willing to do is write a big check to get someone to go away. They didn't do it with Jeff Capel 2 years ago. Heather Lyke would swear up and down that it had nothing to do with a buyout, and she might be right. Maybe the thought never crossed her mind. Maybe she really believed in Capel and was always going to give him extra time to try to get it right. But I am fairly confident that if she had decided she did want to move on and she went to the chancellor and the university and the trustees and whoever else would have to sign off on such a thing and said, look, I need like $15 million to make this guy go away, I don't think she would have gotten it. I think she would have been told, no, we're not paying someone not to work. There's too much else going on at the university. There's too many other ways you could use that kind of money beyond just paying someone to go away for not winning games. And so that wasn't going to happen. And I don't even know if Heather Lyke wanted to make the move or not. I really don't know that. I do think Heather Lyke appreciates stability. I think she likes continuity. I think she likes having the same people around. I've been told that in 2018 and after the 2018 season, she wasn't fully on board with firing Sean Watson. That if it was up to her, she might have just kept the gang together. And it was Pat Narduzzi's decision to move on, to make that change. And she signed off because she supports her coaches. But it certainly wasn't like she came to Narduzzi and said, you have to fire this guy. Common misconception about an athletic director's influence and desire to influence those kind of coaching changes and changes to an assistant coaching staff. But I think in the current culture at Pitt, I don't think they're paying a giant buyout to get rid of a coach, unless there are major issues beyond just right now one bad season, one very bad season. And there's no doubt about how bad it is. And I think Like would admit it, and Pat Narduzzi would admit it. This is a bad season. But for now, it's just one bad season. You know what I mean? It's not 3 2-win seasons in a row. It's not even multiple, seasons without a bowl game in a row. It's one bad season. And I'm personally of the mind, and I imagine Heather Like thinks this too, and she probably even has more reasons than this, but I'm personally of the mind that the success Pitt enjoyed really through the first 8 years of the Narduzzi era. I mean, even in some of the low points, like the 5-7 season in 2017, you still end with the win over Miami. The 7-7 season in 2018 still has a Coastal Championship and an appearance in the ACC title game. Obviously, the ACC Championship in 2021, winning 20 games over the next 2 years, a 9-win season last year. It's a perfectly good outcome on a sort of regular season for Pitt. I think all of those things built up a fair amount of capital. And I'll see sometimes people will post things like, well, Narduzzi has wasted all the goodwill from that. I mean, goodwill, what, this or that? I mean, when you win, they love you. When you lose, they hate you. I mean, that's the reality of it. I mean, fresh off the ACC championship game, or fresh off the ACC championship season, as soon as Pitt lost to Tennessee, it was off with his head again. I mean, so I'm not too concerned about the goodwill of the fans as much as sort of the capital that Narduzzi has probably built up at Pitt with the success that he has had, because the success that he's had is fairly considerable and tangible. Brought a real championship trophy to Pitt for the first time in 40 years. That's worth something. It still counts for something. And it probably buys you a bad season or two if you happen to have one. And that's what they're having. Now, the biggest thing about a bad season is how you respond and how you bounce back and how you move forward. Like what you do next time, what you do in the next season. And the importance of 2024 grows and grows and grows as 2023 continues to slip and slip and slip. All right. We're not going to get to 3 shots, but we can at least get a second one down. That one was much smoother than the first one. I hope you guys are along with me on the drinking here, but I mean, what else are we gonna do? Let's see, more super chatters rolling in. Let's see how we can get to here. Alan McMurray says, "Do you think this recruiting class will survive what more than likely will be a 2-10 season and looking very bad throughout the entire thing?" That is going to be something we'll have to keep an eye on. That's something we'll watch. I mean, I think recruits tend to say the right things, tend to say good things all along. We're still sticking with it. Pitt's in a rough spot. They were all very excited about the Louisville game. Here's the thing. When you are in a season like this, this is when your relationships really come through, where you have to be able to rely on your relationships with the recruits in order to keep the class together. They're going to lose some guys. They would have lost guys even if they were 8-2 right now instead of 2-8. You're going to lose guys. The question is how many, and can you hold on to the key guys? Can you hold on to the important guys? And that's going to come back to the relationships. You can't let the on-field results be the only thing in a recruitment, and you can't let them be the most important thing in a recruitment. It's got to be about more than that. It's got to be about my relationship with you. So whether we win 10 games or we lose 10 games, you and we've got this relationship, and you're coming up here to play for me, to work with me, for us to build that relationship and be close, because I'm going to take care of you and I'm going to help you achieve your goals. And yeah, man, we have a rough season this year, but we know you're going to help us make it better, and you and I are going to do it together. So that's where, Charlie Partridge, Corey Sanders, Ryan Manilak, Archie Collins, on and on down the list. All those guys, those relationships have to be strong because they're going to be tested. They're going to be tested. And you hold on to your recruits and you hold on to a class by the strength of those relationships. But that's a great question. It's definitely something we're going to have to keep an eye on as time goes. Scott Smith says, what's your take on Narduzzi's comment at the end of the first quarter on Syracuse doing something they hadn't practiced for? Yeah, this got a lot of play on Twitter. Narduzzi said that what Syracuse was doing on offense was totally different than what Pitt practiced all week. And that's understandable. It got played up as, wow, Narduzzi is just saying his team is totally unprepared. They were unprepared for what Syracuse did on offense because Syracuse didn't do that all year. I mean, if you watch Syracuse this season, yeah, they're a run-heavy team. Garrett Schrader likes to run. And, LaQuint Allen is obviously a very good running back. But, Dan Villari, let's look up Dan Villari's stat. Actually, I'm on the Syracuse website. Let's look up Dan Villari's stats. Cumulative football stats here from the 2023 season. So Dan Villari today had 17 for 154 and a touchdown. Prior to this, he had 2 carries for 3 yards. All season, Dan Villari had 2 carries for 3 yards. All right. Pat Narduzzi was saying, we haven't practiced for all this Wildcat stuff with LaQuint Allen and, Schrader being such a featured runner, which he was to some extent in Syracuse's offense early in the season, but not quite as much as he was today. And then we definitely haven't practiced for Dan Villari being a Wildcat quarterback. That's what he was saying. He was saying, look, Syracuse is doing things they don't normally do. You can only prepare for the things you've seen a team do. I mean, Narduzzi even said, yeah, we saw plays that they ran earlier this season that they were running against us in 2016 and all this stuff. Well, that's what you're going to prepare for. You're going to watch 9 games of Syracuse football this season and see Syracuse do A, B, and C, and you're going to prepare for A, B, and C. You're never going to assume that they're going to do J, K, and L that weren't even in their playbook, that they never even showed. I mean, Dan Villari, 2 carries, 3 yards, all season. And he carries the ball 17 times for 154 yards today. That's what Narduzzi was saying. It's not about being, by definition, yes, they were ill-prepared. They were not prepared for that. But there's a reason they weren't prepared for it is because Syracuse wasn't doing it. If Syracuse had done that all season and Pitt wasn't prepared for it, then yes, that would be an indictment on the coaching staff. But Syracuse didn't do that all season. That wasn't their base offense. Maybe it should have been because they looked really good. But that's what Narduzzi was saying. That's what that comment was about. Bill Saunders says, brutal game, brutal season. Can we talk about Danielson's throat getting stepped on well after the whistle with no flag? The run D after that was gone. I don't know if the run D was there before that either, though. Run defense was pretty bad all season. I didn't see on the replay, I didn't see him getting his throat stepped on. I saw the Brandon George eye gouge. I mean, things happen. I mean, look, there were calls that were made and shouldn't be made. The Rodney Hammond fumble shouldn't have been a fumble. I mean, you can watch on the replay. The whistle blows before the ball comes out. I mean, the whistle blowing, wherever you want to rule forward progress, when the whistle blows, that's the end of the play. Whatever's happening when the whistle blows is the end of the play. And so when you watch the replay and you watch it with sound and you hear the whistle before the ball comes out, Not a fumble. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at this point. Jack says, Jack's a super chatter. He says, the saddest part for me is I think we go at least 6-6 if Nick Patty stays just one more year and goes in at halftime in the West Virginia game. I mean, look, you could probably make a case, and I would be on board with it, that if Christian Veer starts from the beginning or goes in at the West Virginia game, they've won a few more games. I mean, Veer in the first half today was 11 of 17 for 149 and a touchdown. Now he had 2 fumbles and an interception, and that sort of clouds that in the second half and makes his, what did he finish with in this game? 13 of 22 for 161. Okay, so 11 of 17 for 149 and a touchdown in the first half. Second half, 2 of 5 for 12 yards and a pick. Oh, goodness. I mean, yeah, I held on to the belief that if Christian Veer had started playing in the second half of the West Virginia game, Pitt would have won, maybe Virginia Tech, maybe Wake Forest, maybe Syracuse. Who knows at this point? I want to see what happens going forward with the quarterback situation. I wrote about this yesterday, too. I talked about this on the Morning Pit, that, look, you might as well see Nate Yarnell and see him for more than you've seen him in the last couple of games, because he's gotten in the last, I guess he got in the Notre Dame game and then this game today. I mean, you might as well give him a shot. Even to the point, and I advocated this and the coaches wouldn't do it, but I still think they should, quarter by quarter. Go quarter by quarter. Honestly. And I know, like, truthfully, losing today, I wouldn't be surprised if that created even more desperation just to get a win on Thursday night against Boston College. Like, if they had won today and they're 3-7, and I mean, not like 3 wins is any better than 2 wins, or at least, well, they won. Maybe they could be a little bit looser and try some different things against Boston College. Now, I think they're probably even tighter, because now they really are staring down 2-10, and one of the worst seasons at Pitt in like 30 years, maybe 25. So they might be even tighter and even less likely to try a quarterback rotation and get some equal reps for those guys. Or maybe they came out of it and they're just going to give Nate Yarnell the start. My guess is no. My guess is it'll be back to same old, run it back against Boston College on Thursday night. Whoops. Alan McMurray's a super chatter, but retracted his message. I missed what you said, Alan. Bet it was good. Oh, man, you guys are questioning what I'm drinking? Some guys are saying I'm drinking 10 proof? Come on now. It's 84 proof. If I can add up the math it right. Wait, I saw another super chatter in here. Want to get to that one for sure. Focus Pooler 1 says, did Narduzzi say before the game this was the first game of the 2024 season? Hope not. So that's really interesting. I'm glad you caught that, and I'm glad you brought that up. I'm really glad you brought that up, Focus Pooler. Kudos to you. All right, I caught that. It was, I forget when they said it, but the announcer said that Pat Narduzzi told them the 2024 season starts today. And it was, it's in the middle of the game. There's a lot going on. But I caught that and then moved on to something else. What an interesting quote. Because if the 2024 season starts today, you need to make changes. You need to make changes personnel-wise, and you might even need to make changes coaching-wise. If the 2024 season started today, I mean, first of all, it started off with a terrible loss, one of the worst of the Narduzzi era. But if the 2024 season really is starting today, then, brother, open up the quarterback competition, open up the running back competition, open up the defensive line competition, open up the cornerback competition. Start finding out about those spots. Start finding out. And I'm not saying you have to throw these last 2 games, but you need to find out. had a great line in the 3-2-1 column. I'm going to toot my own horn here because I don't know if anybody really noticed it, but I was really proud of myself. I said that, you don't need to play these games to lose, or you don't have to completely throw away these games. I'm not saying you need to F around. I'm just saying you need to find out. I thought that was really clever, but nobody really got it. Nobody picked up on it. Sometimes, true genius is never appreciated in its prime. But look, I mean, find out about these guys. Find out if Nate Yarnell can lead you for a full quarter, not just mop up duty, not just garbage time at the end of a game. Find out what he does in the second quarter. You put him in at the end of the fourth quarter, 2 out of the last 3 games. Put him in the second quarter. Start Christian Veer, play for a quarter. Go to Nate Yarnell. And if he stinks, if he just can't hang, fine. You found out. And that creates even more, that you need to go into the transfer portal and try and make some, solve your problems there. But find out. I'm not saying that a guy like Nikai Johnson or Elliot Donald needs to be on the clock, but put him on the clock for these last 2 games. Find out. You guys going to make plays or not? Are you going to go out and be productive or not? If you're not going to change coaches, if you're not going to make any changes to your coaching staff midseason, all right, put these guys on the clock. Tell them, like these 2 games, this is where you need to, and I mean, that's not as good of an example as the players. I think with the players, you can give them more playing time and give them an opportunity to show what they can do. The coaches have shown you. I think you probably should know at this point who you're keeping and who you're not. If you're Pat Narduzzi, you should know that. Like, anybody on that staff should be able to walk into Narduzzi's office tomorrow and say, Coach, tell me the honest to God truth. Are you going to fire me? And Narduzzi should be able to give them an answer. He should be able to sit down with a legal pad like this one and write down, gonna be back, not gonna be back. And he should be able to make a list of his 10 assistants. He should know that. And nothing that happens in these final 2 games should change that. Just like, and that could go back 3 or 4 games. They're like, nothing that happened in the final 6 games of this season should change that. He should already have some of those conclusions drawn. Let's see. Some more comments. I think there's another super chatter here. I thought. Yeah, Alan McMurray. There you are. You accidentally deleted. Just wondering your thoughts on the Brandon George with the eye gouge of the Syracuse running back. It looked pretty bad. It looked pretty bad on the replay. They zoomed in on it, and clearly the running back came off in some serious discomfort. They zoomed in on it, and it looked bad. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And Mark Herzlich called it a dirty play. And that's what it looked like. That's what it looked like. I don't know Brandon's intention. I think Brandon George has played well over the last few games. I think once it became clear what Syracuse was going to do today, they went with Brandon George pretty heavy in this game. I haven't even looked at the defensive stats. He ended up with 5 tackles. Javon McIntyre made 11. Donovan McMillan made 10. So, safeties making most of the tackles, which is not atypical in this defense. Usually the safeties are the biggest tacklers in this defense, particularly against a run-heavy defense. It doesn't necessarily mean everything's getting to the second level. Those guys just play so close to the line of scrimmage that they're often very heavily involved. But those 2 led the tackles, McIntyre, McMillan. Shane Simon had 7. Dayon Hayes had 6. And then you have a bunch of guys, DeShields, George, Lovelace, all had 5 tackles each. It's funny. Syracuse doesn't have not many guys for Syracuse made tackles, probably because Pitt ran only 49 plays. Syracuse had the ball for 37.5 minutes. And that's my thing in this game. They just pushed them around. They just pushed Pitt around. They played bully ball, and it worked. They played some goofy, gimmicky stuff that they hadn't done all year. They did it for the first time. They installed a brand new offense in 1 week and just said, all right, guys, this is going to work if we are just more physical, if we're tougher, if we're stronger, and if we just go out and push those guys around. And it's the only way it's going to work. Because, look, it doesn't work if you don't do that. If you're not more physical, if you don't push them around, if you don't dominate at the line of scrimmage, this thing doesn't work. Syracuse gets like 50 yards on the whole game. If they're not more physical, if they can't do those things, if they can't manhandle Pitt's defense, it doesn't work. But they looked at it, and they looked at the film, and they probably looked at Pitt's offense too. They're like, it's not like these guys are going to put up 45 points, so we're going to have to score to keep up with them. So that made it appealing as well. But they looked at it like, look, we think we can push this defense around. And that has not been something many teams have said going into games against Pitt's defense over the last 9 years. There aren't many times other teams have come in and said, we can push this defense around. We can beat them physically. We can be more physical than them. We'll catch them a little off guard when we start doing some goofy stuff. And then, but even once they adjust, we're still going to be able to push them around and do these things that we want to do. There aren't many teams that have said that or tried to do that over the last 9 years. And when teams have tried, they've largely failed. Syracuse didn't fail. The plan worked to perfection. They were tougher. They were more physical. They were stronger. They wanted it more. They dominated. They manhandled. I mean, all those different things. I mean, Pitt should be embarrassed by that. Pitt should be embarrassed by how they played today and how Syracuse was able to just control the game. Start to finish, both sides of the ball. See if we got any more super chats. Rolling it. Wait, where's the super chat screen here? I think Alan McMurray might have been the last one. I'm just scrolling up through all the chats and everybody talking about how I was muted. I really apologize for that. Hopefully I didn't. Have that too long that I was. Hopefully I didn't go too long muted while I was trying to mask the coughing there, but yeah, I apologize to everybody for that. You know, hopefully when you listen to, I appreciate everybody who stuck around. You guys didn't all just bail like, oh, I'm gonna leave this idiot, moron, push the button and didn't unpush it. But that's what I get for trying to make this like a little bit more of a professional operation, that I mute during the cough, like actually having a cough button. That's what I get, is it ends up staying muted and then you miss all the great stuff. But I repeated everything that I said, so it's good. We're all covered here. But this season keeps finding ways to get worse. There's two more games left. It's a nice picture of Bub Means there. Bub Means had, made a couple nice plays. Konate Mumfield, nice touchdown. If you're looking for positives, that's pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Pitt plays next Thursday night game at Acrisure Stadium. We'll be live. We will do a live post-game show after that game at Acrisure Stadium. We'll have the whiskey, we'll have the beers, and we'll sit down and talk after that game. We've done these primetime games. We've done post-game shows in the past, and yeah, it goes pretty late. We're up until 1 or 2 in the morning, but it'll be all right. We'll be here, and hopefully you can tune in as well after the game and join the post-game show. Of course, we'll have all the morning Pitt episodes all through the week. We'll be talking Pitt basketball, probably a lot this week, in addition to Pitt football. But we'll have those every day of the week here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So you didn't like the game, but do me a solid and like this video, all right? And subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you never miss any of our all the Pitt video content that we put up. The morning Pitt videos, practice highlights, interviews, press conferences, all those different things. And these live streams. We do one every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Me and Jim Hammock get together to talk a little Pitt sports. And then, of course, we have these post-game shows, which are a lot of fun as well. After every game, every football game, we'll start doing some basketball ones as well. We'll mix those in. But it will all be right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate everybody who joined the live stream, everybody who came in with the super chatters and all that stuff. It's one of those things where, it's a loss, but at least we all got together to talk about it. And Got together to talk about it and enjoy it. Our guy Anthony Tennyson, just said I should end it with one more shot. I don't know, Tony. I like you, Tony. So we'll do it. All right. We'll get one more before we roll out of here. Get back to work. Yeah. Not going to do a half one. We'll top that one off. For Anthony Tennyson, all the dedicated Pitt fans out there, you guys who tune in every week, we appreciate you. More than I can say. Like this video, subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good weekend, everybody.